Welcome to another episode of Beyond Physical, where we talk about the mental, emotional, social, and at times spiritual benefits of exercise. We believe that exercise is more than movement, and this podcast is our attempt at sharing that message with the world by sharing our own as well as our guests' experiences and knowledge. If you enjoy it, we ask that you please spread the message by leaving a rating and review, or even better, by sharing with a friend. Greetings, welcome, thank you for joining me. Welcome to another episode of Beyond Physical. Today I'm going to take you through some of my favorite exercises for strength and longevity. It's a short list, and that's intentional. I do like to keep things nice and simple, and typically the workouts and the exercises that I do are pretty basic. I'm not one for lots of frills and bells and whistles, and contrary to what popular fitness-inspired internet trends and whatnot would have you believe, you can achieve results with a fairly basic and standard exercise routine. So the reason I've picked these workouts, to be honest, is because I enjoy them and they're effective. Those two things typically go hand in hand, but I'm a human being. If I don't like an exercise, I'm less likely to perform it. Even if I really do need to do it, I'm as guilty as anyone when it comes to neglecting certain prehab and rehab stuff. But I've certainly found that these movements have reaped tremendous rewards for me over the years in terms of strength. I can definitely wear as a badge of honor the fact that I've been fortunate enough not to have had many serious injuries, and I do come from a fairly high-level contact sport background and having played rugby for over a decade, well after school as well. And I got through it relatively unscathed despite the concussions, but that's hard to avoid because it is, after all, a high-impact sport. The way I played the game was pretty direct, so I was asking for it, some may say. But anyway, enough of the chit-chat. I'll cut right down to the chase. So number one. So when I talk about my favorite exercises for strength and longevity, again, as I said, my favorite, this is subjective. Everyone's different. You may have different ones, and that's absolutely fine. But maybe you'll take away from this some information that you previously didn't have, and that's cool. Or maybe we align, and we can chat and geek out on our favorite exercises outside of the podcast. But number one, surprise, surprise, the bench press. So I absolutely love the bench press. I think it is a very misunderstood exercise. I think it is strenuous on the body in ways that most other exercises aren't. I think it asks a lot of your body. It asks a lot of your CNS if you like to go nice and heavy, like I do. There's a very high neuromuscular demand from the movement. And I think that contributes to why it is such an effective exercise. It teaches your body to move through a fairly uncomfortable movement pattern. You really have to get down and dirty into the sort of technical nuance of how to bench press comfortably, effectively, and powerfully. And I think why I've chosen the bench press is because it was a great challenge for me. And it's the exercise that I have probably got the most reps with collectively over the, what is it now? 13 or so, 12, whatever it may be, years that I've been lifting relatively consistently. I topped out with an all-time PR of 180 kilos, which I did in June of 2023. And I definitely intend on reaching that number again. I'm not quite there at the moment, but I still love the movement. And I found it incredibly difficult to progress with the bench press. I plateaued for about a year and a half, 2 years before I watched a video by Sebastian Oreb, shout out Australian strength coach on Instagram, about rest times in between strength-focused compound lifts and how to improve your numbers on the compound lifts and what is necessary to improve those numbers. And basically he spoke about taking rests of 5 to 8 minutes between working sets, which was completely novel to me at the time and quite mind-blowing, and in many ways for me pretty counterintuitive, because Up until then, I'd been training predominantly for hypertrophy to build muscle. And of course, being strong was important for my sport, but it was by no means the main motivator for my training. However, given the fact that I was spending so much time on the bench press and I was seeing little to no results at a point, I decided, you know what, I do want to increase the weight that I can lift. So let me do a little bit of research, and I found that little tidbit, and the progress from then was pretty consistent. Obviously, as time progresses, the more sort of the more the work it requires to realize a marginal gain becomes more. So, in other words, at the beginning, you have to do relatively little to see significant results. And as you progress, you need to do more to see smaller results. It takes more effort to realize an incremental gain. But with the bench press, it really started to come right for me when I was doing it twice a week. I did a heavy day, so that was doubles, triples, fours or fives, and I would typically go kind of like for like. So it'd be 2 times 2 or 3 times 3 or 4 times 4 or 5 times 5. 5 times 5 for me was relatively high volume. So, you know, if I was going very heavy, I'd probably drop it down to 3 times 5. But the one day would be focused on that, really being at an RPE of at least 8. So I would take it pretty far, maybe sometimes too far. Really, really difficult, but each rep looking the same. And then another day would be dedicated to some sort of variation of the bench press. So a close grip bench press, a pin press, a pause rep, a wide grip bench press. That was one that I didn't really incorporate much, and I don't really incorporate much, to be honest. Why? I don't find it particularly comfortable, and I feel like the risk doesn't constitute enough of a reward for me to warrant loading a wide grip bench press. I may be completely wrong. The research could say otherwise, that I need to be doing it if I want to see optimal quote unquote gains, but it's just not something that I enjoy, so I don't do it. So I would either do a high volume day or a variation day. So a high volume day would be anything over 5 reps, and that would be filled with a lot more accessory lifts. On the heavy day, I would typically, and most of the time, only do bench press. So I'd bench press for 45 or 50 minutes, and that would be the workout. Sometimes if I was feeling interesting and spicy, I would do one accessory. So I would do tricep dips on a dip bar, because I feel like the dip bar apparatus allows for a much greater transfer to the bench, because you incorporate your chest a lot more, you get a greater range of motion, so you can stretch your triceps a little bit more. Or maybe I would do a cable fly, because I like how cable flies feel, and hypertrophy is still quite important to strength building, given that generally speaking, more muscle equates to the potential for more strength. Don't get confused in that more muscle automatically equals more strength, because not necessarily always, but generally speaking it does. So, and although the focus of that workout, that heavy day, was not hypertrophy, I thought it was fun and not harmful to just add hypertrophy on top of that. But many people may advocate for that being junk load. So additional load that doesn't add justifiable benefit to the workout and is actually just exposing you to higher risk of injury. So anyway, that being said, that was the one focus. And then the next day would be a variation day or a high volume day. So doing more sets, so anything over 5 reps, typically 3 or 4 sets on the bench press. I really like on a volume day to do a Dorian Yates style one top set to failure with a drop set optionally, and then 2 or 3 accessory lifts. I very rarely go over 4, because that really does feel like junk volume to me, especially now when I'm not as conditioned with the movement. So I usually stop it at that. Some examples of accessory lifts I would do on a higher volume day would be pull-ups, barbell rows. What many people don't realize is that your upper back is a key driving force behind a strong bench press. If you bench press properly and you have your elbows at about 45 degrees to your torso, you're engaging your lats a lot, and as well as you're pinning you're retracting your scapula, which is a cue to switch on the lats as well. So the upper back is very engaged and very important for the bench press, which is something that's often overlooked, and also seemingly quite counterintuitive, because a bench press is considered to be a push movement. So and the back is typically looked at as a pull muscle group. So you're thinking, why are you doing pull movements to improve a push exercise? Well, person, that is actually it's a misconception. A bench press done well and a bench press done for maximal force output is actually typically a full body movement. It's not only a full upper body movement; it's a full body movement. And this is when things like leg drive and foot positioning come into it, as well as engaging your glutes, really getting nice and tight. And maybe if you want to get extra technical and have had sufficient experience, you've done sufficient research, and you've perhaps had the assistance of a coach, you can incorporate an arch, a little bit of an arch in your back. You'll watch, if you see these big powerlifters, they're oftentimes set up in a way where there is a slight arch, but really beware with that, because that is quite an advanced component of the bench press, and it can sometimes also expose you to a higher risk of injury. So just watch out for that. But this is really why I love the bench press, and it does speak to the fact that I do tend to geek out on things that I find fun or cool. Is like I just want to find out every little nuance around the thing, and bench press is an endless fountain of nuance in terms of the weight room. It is a seemingly simple exercise that is in actual fact incredibly complex and multifaceted in terms of the different ways that you can do it, the ways that you can alter it to change the benefit of it, the ways that you can optimize it and reposition it to better suit your dimensions and what the outcome that you're looking for are. So when done properly, the bench press is a great strength builder for your upper body in general. Very, very good for your upper body, and it teaches you great neuromuscular awareness when you're engaging every muscle in your body to perform the movement appropriately. I often find that when I'm bench pressing heavy, I'll actually find a little bit of a pull in my hamstring where I'm like, it's okay. I know I'm really switched on because I've got everything switched on fully, and I'm exerting fully, and there goes my hamstring. A client of mine the other day complained, my hamstring is pretty switched on. I was like, there you go, sir. That's you're bench pressing the way I want you to be bench pressing. We're going heavy, and everything is switched on, and we're not trying to be bodybuilders during this set. We're trying to be strong, so you can be stronger if you use more muscle. So, and that's what I think about the bench press. So it's an excellent tool. It's very effective. It's one exercise that you can also load pretty heavily. Any barbell movement, you can get lots of weight on there, relatively speaking, to whatever your strength level is. And I think that's incredibly useful. So I like the bench press because it's a good overall strength developer. I love it. It's very nuanced. It's a serious rabbit hole. And if you want to improve your bench press, you can do 2 bench press sessions a week, the one focused on going relatively heavy, and then the other focused on going higher volume, stimulating more of a hypertrophy benefit or a different specific component of the bench press. With something like a band-assisted bench press, you are giving yourself a little bit of a spot on the way up out of the hole, which is the bottom part of the movement off the chest, and then the resistance of the band is going to decrease as you progress up the movement, so that the tension is reducing and you're having to exert more force to continue pushing the weight into the lockout position, which, because it's conserving a bit of energy at the bottom, allows you to go heavier than you typically would have, and therefore load more than you perhaps usually would be able to at the top of the movement, so strengthening that element of the lift. The same goes for something like a pin press, although a pin press can also be used to help with really explosive power, because oftentimes with a pin press, I will alternate in sessions, so not in the same session, but in differing sessions, whether or not I release. So I allow my muscles to release tension while still bracing and staying in the same position, but releasing tension and then re-engaging to build the tension and then exerting the force again. And that's really helpful for explosive power too. It does also aid with the top portion of the movement. You can also do a board press for that. There are many ways you can do that. You can also do a typical banded bench press where it's accommodating the resistance so that the force again is being amplified and increased as you move the weight upwards. So you're really working on that lockout, which is where most people fail their bench presses. When you have experienced, if you ever have experienced failing a rep on the bench press, more times than not, it is in the lockout. It's at the second half of the movement. It's not at the bottom of the movement. If you are looking to improve that bottom half of the movement, a pause bench is also a really cool tool to utilize. Next, I won't geek out so much on this exercise, but it is probably my favorite exercise of all, which is the barbell back squat. I love a barbell back squat, and the reason I love a barbell back squat is probably the exercise I've done the second most reps on. I think it is an incredibly important movement pattern that improves daily life. It's excellent for hip mobility. It's excellent for ankle mobility. It's excellent for core stability. It's fantastic for full body strength. Everything is switched on. And again, it requires a lot of technical understanding. And it's an exercise that I'm still learning a huge amount about in order to do safely, in order to do nice and heavy. And it really hurts. It probably hurts the most in a good way. And it makes me feel like no other exercise makes me feel. Honestly, it's a really beautiful one to take to that red zone. I love it. And you can play around with it, varying your stance. You can elevate your heels so that you're focusing more on your quads. You can narrow your stance so that you're focusing more on your quads. You can widen your stance so that you focus more on the posterior. You can slightly lower the bar on your back so that it's not so much close to the cervical spine and lower down along the trap so that you're doing a low bar squat. And then you'll find that the weight is distributed in a different way, which causes you to hinge more at the hips, to bend forward a little bit, almost like doing a bit of a good morning, but not quite. You don't want to be using your spinal erectors to lift the weight up. But because of that, you're finding a huge shift in how the load is distributed, and it's really going into that posterior chain. As you hit the bottom of the rep, you're feeling a beautiful stretch right there in the glutes, into the hamstrings as well. It really opens up nicely. Your hips open up beautifully. It's a really great stretch at the bottom. And then as you're getting up, you're feeling that contraction all the way through the posterior chain as well, which is really, really helpful and really effective in developing that posterior, where a lot of people, and that precisely that whole process for that specific use case around a low bar squat with a slightly wider stance is something that can be applied for people who work desk jobs and have tight hips and often have, iffy backs. Now, I'm not prescribing this, and you need to go see someone who's qualified to get the go-ahead on this, because you also are putting yourself at risk. But a lot of the time, a sore lower back is because your posterior chain is underdeveloped and your lower back is overactive because it's overcompensating. So I find that a squat, when executed this way, the way that I've just described it can be very helpful for things like that. And I find that for someone who has struggled with lower back pain in the past, it has been very helpful in alleviating that. I've obviously put in other things like hamstring curls on a Bosu ball, or yoga ball rather, hip extensions on a GHD machine, hip thrusts, all those kinds of things, which don't really load your back that much. I mean, the hip extension does, and an RDL would too, to a degree. But the squat's been really helpful for it as well, which has been amazing. And it feels so good, because you can load it up just like the squat, because it's with, just like the bench press, because it's with a barbell. You can load it up in a way that you might not be able to load other things up. A heads up though, this thing, this movement is it can be high risk if you don't do it properly. So you need to really make sure that you're doing it properly. But I choose the squat as my second warrior in my little arsenal, in my little battalion of exercises that I love and I think are fundamental to building strength and longevity, because it's an excellent overall lower body strength builder. It's great for the core, and it can help solve a lot of problems as well. And it translates to daily life phenomenally. Getting up off of a chair. Again, there's so many variations you can do with a barbell back squat. You can do a box squat. You could, this is not necessarily technically a barbell back squat, but you could do a Zercher squat where you're holding it in front of you as if you're kind of picking up a kid off the ground. You really get nice and low, open up those hips, let the elbows come in between the knees, or just touching the knees, and then you get up. You get some really nice depth. The weight is distributed differently. It really helps activate the full posterior with the back as well, because it's pulling you forward. You're having to keep your torso upright, and it feels amazing. Third is the hollow hold. I have not been one to venture much into the world of training a ton of core outside of doing heavy compound lifts that require stabilizing the core. But just a small caveat, the core is predominantly tasked with stabilizing the spine. So any muscle that does that, which includes your glutes, it includes your hip flexors, it includes your spinal erectors, it includes your rectus abdominis, your abs, the six-pack muscles. It's not just the abs, it's everything that supports your spine. Just a caveat, but coming back to it, I've not been one to train and target core as much as I do other things, specifically outside of heavy compound lifts, as I said. But one thing that I have really loved, especially recently, has been the hollow hold, specifically weighted hollow holds. The reason why I love the hollow hold so much is that it's quite easily scalable. You can start off by doing things like dead bugs or tuck holds instead, if you aren't ready for a full hollow hold. And then you can also progress it to a weighted hollow hold where you, you have either a weight in your hands or barbell. I love using a barbell. It feels really good to do that. And it's awesome for teaching core tension whilst also having the neuromuscular awareness and the almost proprioception in a way, but I don't quite think it's proprioception. It's more body awareness to practice a pelvic tilt so that your lower back is as flat as it possibly can be when you're executing the movement. And I think that's really helpful, just helping to learn this kind of awareness around the core muscles, around the lower back, around the abs. It's very useful, and it feels really good. And I think it has a very unique kind of benefit. It's different and for me in many ways preferable to a plank, because with the plank there's a lot of shoulder activation and shoulder strength required, where if you don't necessarily have that, a hollow hold takes that out of it to a degree. So I love it. I love the hollow hold for a core movement. And then finally, for what I think is the granddaddy of longevity, and can be done the most accessibly for people who are obviously physically able to do it. It's tricky if you aren't. It's not tricky. It's impossible. So unfortunately, but assuming that you have the ability to do so, and that goes, of course, for all the other movements as well. My favorite for many reasons is walking. The longevity MVP. And it's so much more than just physical with this one. And I thought it'd be cool to end off on this one because it really does tie into the beyond physical. And I'll keep us under 30 minutes. I'll do my best. I don't want to go on for too long. I'm actually going to go and do some squats now after this. So I must be on time. And I'm doing a braai, so I don't want to be too late for my braai. Anyway, because I must go to sleep. And then after I sleep, in the morning I have jiu-jitsu and things, So time management is important. But I digress. Walking. Why do I love walking? It is so accessible. You need your feet. You need your physical health. But even if you are sick, you can do it. It's relatively low risk even when you are sick. It's low impact. And it's also easily scalable. If you really struggle with walking downhill or uphill, you can find a flat area. If you do not struggle with up or downhill, or you do, but in a healthy degree, that's a beautiful way to make it harder and keep it low impact, but to actually get some nice stretching in. It really stretches out the gastroc and the soleus when you're walking uphill. It's a beautiful movement for getting some knees over toes, knee health type movement when you're walking downhill. And it provides such phenomenal headspace and thinking time. I get better thinking time walking than I do doing anything else. I've come up with some of my most exciting ideas on walks, and I feel really creative when I walk, and I feel very clear mentally when I walk. And I think that walking is something that most people can build into their daily routine, and that's what makes it such an effective exercise for longevity and strength, because in order to perform your strength exercises effectively, you need what's called GPP, or you want what's called GPP, general physical preparedness. And cardiovascular health is a key component for this, because when you are, let's take us back to the squat, because this is a typical example where this would be the case. When you are performing a squat and you are doing, let's say, a higher volume type squat, or even if you're doing a heavy squat, it's very common. Maybe you are 30 seconds or 20 seconds into the movement and your legs feel fine, your back feels fine, your core feels fine, everything feels fine, but your lungs. You're huffing and puffing, and you actually have to stop the set because from a cardiovascular perspective, you have failed the movement. Now, in this case, that's not the worst thing, but if your intention is to get a strength or muscle building benefit from the squat, then you're not deriving the benefit that you actually are looking to achieve from the squat. Yes, you'll still see some benefit, but you won't get as much out of it as you wanted. And ideally, when performing a movement, you don't want it to be a secondary system that fails you or that succumbs to fatigue first before the actual thing that you're targeting. And walking can help with this, particularly walking uphill and walking regularly, getting at least 10,000 steps a day. I try and get 15,000 steps a day in, which has proven to be more challenging over the last month, given that I've put running on the back burner. But it's also forced me to be more intentional about my walking, which I've absolutely loved. And as I said, it provides for such amazing thinking time. Or you could even use it for some additional learning. You can put on a podcast. You can call a friend, catch up with a friend. You can read. Many of the people that have seen me read think it's absolutely insane, but it's a lot of fun. And to be honest, it's not that hard. It's quite similar to being on your phone whilst you walk, which I see plenty of people doing with ease. You won't walk into a pole. Just look up every 20 seconds or so, and if you lose your place on the page, it's fine. You'll find it. But it's a really cool and accessible movement. Like I said, it's something that you don't even need shoes to do. Provided you're walking on a relatively safe and clean surface, you can do it anywhere. In the office building where you work, you can do it in the garden if you have a garden. You can walk out onto the street and do it in the street. It's something that is far more accessible, doesn't require a gym membership, doesn't require a coach. We all, I'm assuming, most people, I hope, have the ability to walk, so you can do that. And it's incredibly effective. And I think it's most effective in its accessibility and in its sustainability. So going heavy on a bench press, going heavy on a squat, these are things that are not necessarily sustainable because they come with some risk of injury. And of course, so does walking, but it's absolutely minuscule compared to the risk that comes with a heavy squat or a heavy bench. And it's something that you can do for the rest of your life if you manage your time and your health effectively, and no freak occurrences happen that stop you from walking. But that being said, I think to each their own. We all have our preferences, mine being the bench press, the squat, the hollow hold, and walking. And I encourage you to reflect and find things that you enjoy and that feel natural to you and that you can progressively make more difficult over time and do for a relatively long time horizon, something that you can do for at least 10, 15, 20 years into the future, because it's really in building routine and doing something consistently that you will find the compounding results from a health, longevity, and strength perspective. Thank you so much for listening. And if you have any questions about any of these exercises, let me know. I'm very happy to answer them via DM, via comment, via email, whatever it may be. You're so welcome to reach out. As I said in one of the previous episodes gone by, I'm no longer taking on coaches, so this is by no means a call to action for some sort of booking of any kind. I have nothing to sell you, other than the idea of movement being amazing for you and strength being a vessel to unlock your higher self and to enjoy a full and free life. So get in touch. I'm happy to chat, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Also, I failed in keeping us under 30 minutes, but that's okay. Next time. Thank you so much for listening to the show, guys. We love answering specific questions. So if there's anything you want to know, leave a comment or reach out to us directly at HorizonZA on Instagram, or email us at movement@horizongym.com. Until next time, I'm your host, Seb Prentice, and this is Beyond Physical.